He used to say to me, "Oh, there's 10,000 things I don't know." But of the essential point, I am sure. And what was that point? What was that main thing, that main event, that essential thing of what you were sure? And that was, I am God. Thou art that. I am being. I am the one. Essentially. In essence. So I would say, let the disciples of the modern day, let them know whatever. And the more the better. And the better handled, the better. But let them know who they are. As much as that is possible now. I won't go so far as to say that what a man can know of being and how he can identify as being is equivalent to how what a logos can know of being, or how a logos can identify as being. I cannot go that far. That would be to make man the measure of all things. And this tiny, minuscule, almost subatomic particle man, having an equivalent consciousness of being, equivalent to the type of consciousness which a solar or galactic logos has, it doesn't co-measure for me. The great logoi, they have identification as being immeasurably more refined than I can have. And yet, their own identification is, I think, infinitely removed from that which is experienced as the infinitessence, the absolute itself. So here are these 6 stanzas, and they're wonderful. And we're scratching the surface, but, just to give us a start, because it is my assumption, my belief, my hope, that all of us can go deeper into being than we are presently. That's the purpose of these kind of talks. Who knows when I'll be able to give another one? I'm in the middle of Wesak here. It's the middle of the night. I'm having somehow the driven opportunity to talk to myself and to talk to you about the things that matter to me most anyway. I hope I'll be able to pick it up again. Because helping oneself and others, apparent oneself and apparent others, deeper into being, deeper into essence, deeper into reality, deeper into the all-pervading one, whichever one that is, it's worthwhile. It's worth the time. That is something we could all use to give us a place on which to stand. An absolutely firm place of uncompromised confidence on which to stand. And I think we need that. In these times which are so troubled and apparently so deviating from archetypal intention. But maybe, it's just all the smoke and chaos and noise which must appear while things are being rearranged beneath, so that there can be conformity in the Mosaic world to the archetypal world. And the seventh ray, in fact, can bring heaven to earth. So maybe all the smoke and the din, the chaos, all that, does not reflect a permanent problem, but a temporary state of rearrangement in which the lower forms are adjusted in conformity with higher. Number 5, God is time, space, the middle one, with form and process, go. And yet, for A remain. Pure reason then suffices. Well, you know, I think it's talking about a soul state here. And the middle one with which we human beings are concerned is our egoic state upon the higher mental plane. All that goes, and the usual perceptions of time and space in the dense physical body of the planetary logos and even the solar logos. They certainly go, and then pure reason would suffice, because when they go, the consciousness is polarized upon the Buddhic or intuitional plane of pure reason, and we are in the state of transcendental mind. But of course, that's just one very microcosmic interpretation. It's not the universal interpretation. And maybe, you know, like so many of these ancient stanzas, they can be given to a human being to be applied on a number of levels. And one very important level is to apply it to our own liberation from the dense physical body of the solar logos, which would mean the destruction of our causal body and our liberation into the cosmic ethers, where we could begin to intuit, perceive directly, work with the Buddhi, and not be encumbered. I think I have to close this window. It's getting a little cold in here. Not be encumbered by the perceptions which are common to the dense physical body of the planetary logos and even the solar logos, which includes the causal body. So the normal perceptions of time in the lower three worlds and the longer normal perceptions of space in those worlds, they would go, the middle one as the egoic consciousness within the egoic body, that would go, that form would go, the lower forms would go, and their processes would go. And yet, the archetypes that caused them, or that became them, they would remain forever. Implicate, inherent within the higher creative centers. We sometimes, may wonder, where does all our experience go? The physical permanent atom, the astral permanent atom, the mental unit, they're all destroyed. Where do our experiences go? The causal body with all of its repository of values distilled from experience, it's destroyed. Where does it go? Well, there are higher abstractive centers which just draw it all up. How is it that the Tibetan, who was a master, can remember what he used to do as a personality ages ago? He doesn't have those lower permanent atoms unless he wants to generate them. They've been apparently destroyed with the causal body. But the higher permanent atoms have not. And they have withdrawn the experience that was stored in the lower ones, and there those experiences reside, and on and on and on, until eventually the universal logos knows everything it's ever done through every emanation that it's ever put forth. Nothing is lost in that way. Although who is to say what kind of distillations occur on the way up? But let's just say that Even though it says, let there be no recollection and yet let memory rule, which is very practical. I mean, don't get all hung up on where you learned something, just be concerned with what you learned. Still, recollections can be resummoned into consciousness. Nothing is lost, and all experience is extracted, distilled, of course, quintessentialized, of course, but still remembered, if need be. So, yes, it has a microcosmic application, and pure reason will then suffice. That's pure reason in the human sense, and it's related to the Buddhic plane, the lowest of the cosmic ethers. Pure reason then suffices. Suffices to know what needs to be known after all of these mediatory factors have disappeared. Now, I'm not saying that universally time, space, which I've defined differently, and the middle one will disappear when the human causal body disappears. Because, the universe itself seems to me to be a product of time and inseparable from time. It has its own beginning and end. Therefore, it has duration. It has a specifiable duration. And it occurs within a space of self-perception by the universal logos. So time and space are existing in a way on the highest levels. Notice what DK says. Often he says, time and space as we know them. They do not no longer exist, but as we know them. But as we don't know them, they may very well persist, as I've tried to indicate. God is, so in a universal sense, eventually, the time span of our universe disappears, and the space, which is caused by a specific type of self-perception of the universal logos, that disappears because it no longer perceives himself in that way. He withdraws his self-perception, withdraws his perception of that which has been implanted in him by the Absolute, and turns his gaze more fiercely inward until the Absolute reappears. And that fierce inward turning of perception, in which being sees itself, an instantiation of being sees the pure being which brought it into expression, that will cause the destruction of the universe by an act, the most intense act of essentialized self-perception will cause the destruction of the universe. Our universe and every other universe. The whole thing is psychological anyway. It's these, all changes are perceptual changes, and the only thing that can be perceived is the perceiver itself. But to attempt to perceive the very essence of one's being at that high universal level, that, I think, will abstract the perceiver, the universal perceiver, back into the ultimate perceiver. And thus, the universe will be destroyed. So consciousness, as normally known, will be destroyed. That is the middle one. All form and process in the universal sense will go. And yet, where did they come from? They came from the absolute plenum. And so they're archetypes those things those thingless things, which inhere within the infinitessence, they will for A remain in the ultimately abstracted state. How could they ever exist unless they pre-existed in the ultimately abstracted state? They're not made of nothing, although we sometimes call the plenum nothing, but better no thing. So everything that can be externalized, exteriorized, pre-exists its externalization. And thus, for A, does remain. The archetype of time and space, and even the archetype of consciousness, these all inhere, not as separate things, can't be separate things, but they all inhere within the infinitessence, the ultimate being. Not the universal being, but the ultimate beingness. Nothing's ever lost. I guess that's the principle involved here. Nothing's ever lost. But can it be added to? That's one of my philosophical problems. If there, we have an ultimate perfection, an absolute perfection, something apparently happens in a universe. There is a harvest. There is experience, imperience. The universal logos goes through a process. Can the perfect one, the ultimate beingness, accept addition? I think not. And yet there is apparently an addition, which is the harvest of every universal process. It's not like us as a causal body. We're not perfect. We can accept addition after every life. But this greatest of all beings, pure being, is the infinity of infinities, and from it, as far as I can presently understand, nothing can be subtracted, nothing can be added. So that's one to solve. I don't yet know how. I think I've ventured some thought in my book on the subject. It's almost as if anything that can even be learned by the immersed fragment is already inherent in the infinitessence. It only seems like a plus to the immersed fragment that we call the universal logos. But any harvest is only an addition in time and space, and not an addition to the infinitessence. So whatever could be offered is only a confirmation of what's already there. So it's already there, why bother to externalize? We're not going to solve that problem. But I have offered some thoughts, which I call the logic of paradox, and it's about consistency and inconsistency. The human mind can only go so far. And we will have other kinds of minds as we progress. Certainly the logoic mind and the universal mind. Not really the universal mind, but DK calls it presently. It's like the solo logoic mind. But when I say universal mind, I mean the mind of the one universal logos, and that's a very limited mind. That's just words. Conceptually, of course, limited. Limited in comparison with whatever it is that is already forever there, as within infinitessence. So sometimes it's said the masters don't need our gifts, or the Great One doesn't need what we bring so much, because it's already inherent in the one who sent us forth. It's a problem to solve. God is time, space, the middle one, with form and process go. And that's the whole universe on this level of interpretation, and yet for A remain within the infinitessence and pure reason of a cosmic kind, then suffices. We certainly don't need our lower vehicles, our lower faculties, to know when we have transcendent faculties to use. Pure reason then suffices. I think for the time being, practically, we can learn what it is to focus somewhat within the causal body, and we can then learn what it is using the Antikarana to transcend that type of still individual focus and focus within a certain layer of the mind, heart, and will of God. We can do that. We should do that. And all of our spiritual training is directed towards that. That we can attempt to do. About these great universal things, and I think these 6 stanzas have universal applications. And I'm attempting a little bit to extrapolate here, to take the mind further by the law of analogy, and, one day to have it revealed whether accurate or inaccurate, or, in what way false, in what way true. But to extrapolate so we can begin to gather something of the universal process. Finally, number 6. Being cries forth and says, well, obviously something. But the Tibetan is careful here, I think, in attempting to translate what we would only confuse. Being cries forth and says, whatever. It's probably some symbol, some sound, something that conveys what being says. But you begin to wonder whether what follows here is something of what being says. Death crumbles all specifiables, that is. Existence disappears, not being. Existence as a lower type of being. The specifiability which being takes, pure being takes, yet all for A remains. Untouched, immutably the same. And then the cry triumphant, God is. Well, it's kind of like the word that brings all things to an end. Even the destruction of the causal body, it proceeds from above, it proceeds from below, it proceeds from within. And the form then shatters the connection. The hammer blow of the monad operates. The jewel, which is the monad within the jewel in the lotus, flashes forth. Probably, should it not be the case, according to the law of analogy, that there is a universal lotus. I don't know if we should call it an egoic lotus, whatever. But, the flower formation Can it be that being itself, pure being, cries forth? Can it be that this absoluteness acts again, even as it acted, to flash forth the ray? Would it also abstract the ray of the absolute? HPB says pure being doesn't act. But if it becomes, that's a kind of act. And if the universe is, what else was there to become, if not pure being? Pure being then becomes the universal logos in its universe. Is there sound implied here? What is there? This is occurring on a very high level. Of course, we have our own microcosmic level. The monad cries forth. Death will crumble all. The existence of the egoic body and of the personal vehicles will disappear. And yet, inherent in the monad, they will remain. For a time inherent in the triad, then inherent in the monad. And everything that went forth because it pre-existed in its essentialized state and could go forth from that archetypal state into a representative state. But considered universally, this is, maybe we take for granted the facts with which we have become so familiar through the reading of DK's books, so familiar that they seem incontrovertible. They seem as if we've experienced them when we have not. So maybe we get glib about these facts related to our egoic body and so forth, and its destruction. We know so much about them, all we have to do is go through it, and then probably develop an entirely different conception of what they really meant. Being cries forth and says, so from the realm of the absolute, something occurs. Just as the ray flashed forth, it's got to retract. And if it did, death would crumble all. Because all that had been sustained about the one and only being would be drawn out of existence. Time and space, in that respect, would disappear. The time of the duration of the universe, any one of infinitudinous universes, would disappear. Its space of perception would disappear. All of that would disappear because the universal logos would no longer perceive himself in the mode of externalization, but would perceive his essence in the mode of internalization, perhaps responding to the great retractive ray. These ideas, they come, thoughts. Existence disappears, yet all for A remains implicate. Any possibility implicate within the infinitessence, to which nothing can be added and nothing subtracted, which I tried to think through before, as mind-bending as it is. Yet all for A remains, untouched, of course, because who would touch? Who else is there? Immutably the same, never changing, because perfection cannot change. The infinitessence is the acme of possibility, the ultimatization of any possibility. Immutably the same as from the beginning. No, there's no beginning. Forever the same. And all possibilities immutably present. And yet, homogeneously, infinitessentialized. One thing. One. Or one non-thing. So nothing's lost. All is crumbled. All exteriorizations, externalizations are crumbled. all demonstrations of that which is inherent, crumbled, existence, the X, that which is pressed forward out of itself, that disappears. But that immutability which brought it forth, that immutable possibility which brought it forth, remains forever, just as it has been forever, with nothing else to touch it, ever as it is. I suppose the absolutely ultimate archetypes within the infinitessence, and yet homogenized, non-differential, somehow within that which is of one essence, and yet containing all possibility, not as differentiated states, but somehow, to use these coined words, infinitessentialized. The repository of infinitudinous archetypal possibilities, all homogenized within one substance, whichever is exactly what it is. Then the ultimate affirmation: the end is the beginning is the end, God is. So this is incredibly stalwart declarations, as firm a declaration as can be made by the human mind. And maybe these are not made by the human mind, maybe these are human translations of affirmations of beings far greater than the human mind. Why 6? Well, we're talking about monadic things here. 6 is the number of the monad. 24 reduces to 6. Shambhala. 24 reduces to 6 on the 6th plane. Counting from below upwards is the monad, is the pure being, is that which represents God to the macrocosm, and in the very being of the monad is that God. We talk about the monad as a specifiable thing in its own environment, and it too is destructible, but not its essence. Its essence is, in fact, co-substantial with the one ray of the Absolute, which flashed forth into objectivity at the beginning of every universe, and has done so forever and will forever. At least this is one form of human conception concerning universal and super-universal process. What good does it do to ponder on these things? The human consciousness is unstable these days. Consciousness of man could become engulfed by the reverberations of time and space. We could temporarily fail in our executing our part of the plan devised by our logos. Although we will not at length fail. We need a point whereon to stand. We need a point of changelessness in the midst of change. According to the fundamentals of the secret doctrine, there is only one changelessness. There is a boundless, immutable being. And even though, veiled as we are, immersed in the depths of universal self-perception, immersed in the lower levels of our universal logos' self-perception, and thus very far from the actual realization and participation in these states, realization of participation in, we can tend in that direction, and we can establish such a stability in consciousness rooted in as much of pure being as we can perceive, that we can be true pillars in the temple, truly immovable. I think the meaning of the guru, one of the implications, one so heavy he cannot be moved, immovable. Immovable in what way? Immovable through identification as pure being. And if not pure being, because perhaps that is something pertaining to the unveiled infinitessence itself, unveiled even by the universe, then pure enough being, the kind of being which our universal logos demonstrates, as much of pure being as can be invested in or realized when the fragment has become cosmos, according to the out-breath of the great breath. So anyway, it's my hope. I still have a lot of stuff written in my journal here, but never got to it. It's my hope to be able to talk about these things in a way which hopefully will bring us closer, not just to thinking about them, but to somehow realizing them. Now, realization is a high state. It's said to be found on the third or fifth state of the atomic plane. I don't think anybody's claiming to be able to polarize the consciousness there, what true realization is. But, you know, we have to extend our consciousness towards these states which exist but are for us unrevealed. If we see through a glass darkly, we can't allow that always to be so. Even though one day we are to see face to face, we cannot wait for it to happen. We must strive towards the unveiling of the implicate states. And even though we do so haltingly, clumsily, ignorantly, it's the motive that counts. It's the motive. And if we seek to lay the essence bare, we are simply cooperating with the idea that all difference is to be hidden and all form be blotted out, and that the dark light of Shambhala, in which the stars are to be revealed, is beginning to be a little bit operative in our life. So that from color, our movement is toward light, and from light towards darkness, and in darkness, identification as that which is the root of all form, the root of all light, the root of all color, identification as being. I think, ultimately it's about Antakarana building, and everybody, and we will all tend towards being. Everybody has to do it their own way. There's really no one to tell you. There's only one can kind of, indicate the direction of a road which can be followed. But everyone has to work this out within themselves. Because after all, pure being is within oneself, and pure being is oneself. One just has to find the way to retract along the line of emanation and re-become in consciousness what one already and forever has been. And this endlessly. I guess we're supposed to enjoy the journey. Okay, friends, well, this has lasted a bit longer than I anticipated. And it's just scratching the surface. But, after a day of being in a quasi-coma, I don't wish upon you the kind of day I've had. Naught below, before, behind, above. To him naught was. I venture a little bit into the naught, and I hope to do that, in some other of these adventures in identification. What can I call them? Identification 1, identification 2. I like adventures. Adventures into identification. And we'll see whether we can begin to feel, touch with the heart, with the consciousness, with the being. Some of these states which bring us deeper into reality, lifting the veils, so that something of the true nature of the God that is can be revealed to us, who are the apparent extensions of that great being. Well, the hour is late, and let us end with the great invocation. And it seems the most fitting way to end. Most fitting way to end. Even though these are far-out speculations, we do have to be practical here, and light, love, and power do have to manifest on earth through humanity. What I'm trying to do is just to stabilize the consciousness of humanity and stabilize the sense of beingness. I'm trying to do that, which I think will help with the light, love, and power descending and to seal the door where evil dwells. Because where ignorance is not, where can evil be? So, from the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men, Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Okay. We will continue, hopefully at a time when it's possible to do so. There's a lot to discuss, more to know, and everything to be. I would suggest memorizing these 6. Okay. We'll come back and do the best we can, forging ahead into this territory of identification. And happy Wesak to everybody. It's a wonderful time when the all-pervading presence, the all-pervading one, can be felt as substantial.